I grew up on a 110-acre dairy farm in western Massachusetts in a small and loving family of devout Polish Catholics. Both sets of my grandparents came over on the boat from Poland. My parents were raised under very strict household laws that were passed down and strictly enforced upon my older sister and I. Skipping church was never an option, period. Even serious illness, that involved things such as throwing up, were carefully considered before a final decision to stay home was made. I remember services at the major holidays being delivered entirely in Polish and lasting up to 2 hours. Often a little bit of Latin was thrown in just to keep it interesting. As I got older, I recall the task of going to confession, and each week it took on a more mechanical feel as I recited the same little sins week after week. My go-to sins were things like I lied to my mother, or I was mean to somebody at school, or I punched my sister, which actually was usually true. These sins allowed me to just get it done, receive my sentence of reciting 5 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers, and then float along for another week. Attending catechism was a requirement and was taught in old school style by Polish nuns who barely spoke English. Unfortunately, by the time I finished high school, I had pretty much come to dislike church and everything about it. At the time, I didn't understand that my faith in God and the religion that I was brought up to practice were 2 separate things. As a matter of fact, I didn't understand a whole lot about having a relationship with God or Jesus. But that began to change for me when I entered college. Of course, I attended a small, all-girls Catholic college where classes were predominantly taught by, wait for it, nuns. But that's not what affected my shift in understanding. Freshman year, I entered college under a cloud of depression. By the time Christmas break rolled around, I was considering suicide. It was a very dark time in my life. Sorry, wasn't planning on this part. But I actually spent a lot of time praying at that time. And as I look back now, I realized that God was right there with me the whole time, even though I felt very alone at that time. He sent me nightmares about dying to help me shake out of this state of mind that I was in, and to help me realize that I actually didn't want to die. It was then at 19 years of age that I realized how much I believed in God. God sent me the message I needed just when I needed it. God's grace to the rescue. After college, I married my first husband at the age of 24. I knew from the outset that it was a mistake, but I was too insecure at the time and inconfident to go against my family. A year or so into it, I started partying and flirting and spending a lot more time anywhere besides home. One winter evening, I stepped outside of the bar I was at to go start my car. I went back inside, and when I came out a few minutes later, I noticed that the hood was glowing orange, which wasn't a good thing because the car was blue. Realizing that it was on fire, I did the only reasonable thing, and I got in it to back it away from the building. 3 fire trucks, 2 police cars, and a flatbed tow truck later, the car was completely destroyed. It was 2 a.m., and I now needed to call my then husband for a ride home, and it was a Tuesday. I was working at an insurance company at the time and had become friends with an African-American woman who's about 10 years older than me. We often talked about God and spirituality and our faith, and I loved those talks. When I came to work the day after the fire incident, I promptly sat down at her desk to retell my sad tale. She listened patiently, waiting for me to finish, and then she instantly burst out laughing. And she said to me, "Girlfriend, you know what he just did, don't you? He just gave you a spiritual spanking." Now, I had never heard that term before, but I remember sitting there with my mouth agape, realizing she was exactly right. Another message I really needed to hear when I needed it. God's grace stepping in. Fast forward several years, and I was divorced, and now remarried to Adrian. We were living in Connecticut and running our first business, which was a small retail liquor and wine shop. We had many regular customers at the store, and among them was a somewhat mentally unstable homeless man named Rick. He lived in nearby abandoned houses, moving from one to the next as he was found out. Rick bathed every 3 months or so, whether he needed it or not. And I would watch him picking up half-smoked cigarettes out in the parking lot to add to his personal supply. Rick spent his days picking up bottles and cans out of the muddy ditches on the side of the road to pay for his pints of whiskey. Often he was already tipsy when he came in the store. I was 7 months pregnant with Adam when Rick came in one morning. I was sitting behind the register caressing my rather large belly when he walked in. He took a look at me and he asked, "Are you scared?" I thought about it for a moment and I said, "You know what? Yeah, I sure am. I've never been a mom before." Rick looked me directly in the eye and said, "You know, God only gives you what he knows you can handle." Another powerful personal message that I needed to hear just when I needed it. God's grace. Fast forward a couple of years and we had relocated here to Kennebunkport. Adam was 4, Carly was 2, when I began checking out Church on the Cape. A few years after I'd become a regular attendee here, Karen Dombrowski invited me to lunch, saying that she needed to discuss something with me. She said, "I want you to go on this retreat thing. It's only for a couple of days, and I think you'll get a lot out of it." She then promptly refused to answer any of my questions and told me, "Don't worry about it, just be ready when I come to get you." I very reluctantly agreed. A few days before I was scheduled to go, I called Karen. "I can't go. I'm too busy. I have my business, my kids, yada, yada, yada." She listened patiently, waiting for me to finish, and then said, "That's okay if you don't want to go. I understand. But I think you'll get a lot out of it. See you Thursday. Bye." My walk to Emmaus was a true turning point in my spiritual journey. That experience changed me deeply and completely. I felt like a hood had been taken off my head, and for the first time in my life, I could see. I could see Jesus everywhere. I could see God in everything. I could see the purpose and plan that God had for me. It all began to make sense. I remember coming home from the walk, climbing into bed and crying for hours. Years of confusion and frustration were being released. One powerful message from God. But this message was a little bit different than the other ones that I had received throughout my life. Yes, I needed to hear it, but more importantly, God needed to send it. He had plans for me. He needed me to be a strong, faithful Christian disciple. He knew it was time for me to go deep into my faith. What an amazing God we have. Since then, my involvement in Church on the Cape has continued to support my spiritual growth and deepen my understanding. I have been challenged to step beyond my comfort zone and experience new and greater levels of faith. For example, the Brave Christians group is a program that I've participated in the last 2 years during Lent. It's challenged me to live my faith out loud and visibly, and it has been a challenge. It's been really interesting. Yet another powerful message from God. I am so grateful to have experienced God's grace throughout my journey. Never before could I have imagined being this joyous, this bathed in the love of Christ, and this convicted in my faith. It's been a beautiful journey so far. His grace has brought me safe thus far, and his grace will lead me home. Thank you.